You're
There
a
you go.
genius. Okay, coupler maintenance for reliable operation. Sorry to everybody that's not O scale, HO scale rather, and a big thank you to uh, Katie because I used a bunch of their info here. This is the index for what's to follow: standards, section 2 inspection, section 3 trip pin adjustment, section 4 remount and replace, section 5 shimming for knuckle height. This is standard Katie stuff that comes from their instructions and on their website. Some of their specs for how high everything's supposed to be and where it should be. This also shows some correct and incorrect relative to the couplers. This is their magnetic and delayed uncoupling operations. Okay. This is not an official standard, but I created a small template to judge a trip pin angle using a diagram glued to a thin sheet of styrene. So what I've from experience, if it's about 3/32 off the center line of the track, that's about the right place for the trip pin. And here's some of the tools I use, just a piece of test track. This is a Bob Mack coupler height gauge. This is a Katie coupler height gauge, and here's my little template. This is the Bob Miller and Mac Goodwin made this Bob Mack failsafe gauge, and you put it on the track, and down here you can see the coupler height, trip pin height, and then a go no go gauge for the coupler height. And then here's the same thing with a Katie coupler height gauge. This is at the correct height for both the trip pin and the coupler. You can see here that the knuckle is too high on this, which means that basically in this case the car frame is a little too high from the track. So there could be some either shimming, either to reduce the bolster height over here or to use a over what do they call it, the coupler height. The Katie couplers have a high and low shank height relative to the coupler, and I think this would require an over, which would put the coupler lower. Here you can see with the Bob Mack gauge, it's running too high. In this case, we've got a coupler that probably be at the right height, but the coupler pocket allows the coupler to droop. So this is the coupler pocket cover not holding the coupler at the right height. Same thing here with a different car. Here's the coupler height gauge with this is a scale coupler and a regular coupler. And this shows a good relationship. Also a good relationship here. Coupler height is correct, but the trip pin is too high in this case. In this case, coupler is the right height, but the trip pin is too low. And then looking from above, this is a good relationship for the glad hands or trip pins on the couplers. Here's a situation where the coupler trip pins or the couplers themselves are not where they belong. And the result of this is when the coupler goes over a magnet, the coupler gets pulled to the wrong side of the magnet. Here's a situation where it's more correct. And you can see that the magnet pulls not only the trip pin or the glad hand all the way over to the edge of the magnet, but it also, and opens the knuckle, but it also pulls the the coupler to one side to allow for the couplers to delay, and you can push your car wherever you want and drop it off. This is a study of the brass or phosphor bronze spring in a number 5 coupler. And one of the things I want to point out here is how this works. You've got a tapered side on the one side of the shank, and there's one side spring that is flat against that. The spring on the other side has a point that is up against the side. There's a definite purpose for this because it makes the coupler go easier one direction than it does the other. And the fact that this side is flat here, this is what holds the coupler centered when it's in the car. I guess I already said this. The flat part is what holds the coupler centered, and this is the spring that pushes it to make it go straight. Section 3, trip pin adjustment. If the knuckle head is proper height but the pin is not, some adjustment may be needed. Here's the tools that I use. This one is a Kadee coupler pliers, and then this is pretty much a flat nose pliers. I think it's got a little radius to it, but for the most part it's flat jaw. To increase the bend in the angle, you use the Kadee pliers this way, and notice you're bending only the trip pin. There's no stress on the coupler or the coupler shank itself. All of the forces are on the trip pin itself. Here's a case where the trip pin glad hand is too high, and in that case, use the flat jaw pliers the same way. No stress on the coupler or the car, only on the glad hand to make it go straighter. Here's okay, section 4. This is remount or replace. This is a CCS Union Pacific CA3 caboose, and notice the coupler is hanging way down, and there did not seem to be a way for me to get the coupler pocket to hold that coupler up where it belonged. So using some 080 screws and a drill and a tap, I used the coupler pocket to drill out for the tap size for the 080 drill. So I used this as a guide. Then I tapped the holes. Then I pried it off, cleaned up the surface. And then, and this is getting ready to mount a new coupler. This is how I prepare the brass spring for the number 5. I don't like them exactly the way they come out of the package. So what I do is I gently lift the end of this spring over this end tab and push it in back here, so it adds a little bit more bend right here. And then I lift it and put it back out, so it's pushing up against this edge again. And I do the same thing on this side. And what it does is it adds just a little bit more spring tension, a little bit more spring in the against the coupler to do a better job of holding it straight. Here it is back after I've resprung it. You notice there's just a little bit of bow in this. So there's a little bit of spring tension there, and there's a little bit of extra spring tension on this side. And I prep the coupler. There's a boss right here for the ejection of the coupler, and sometimes there's a little burr right here. So I use a fine tooth file to just lightly make sure that there's no burrs on it. The coating on the coupler itself is is a very slick coating. So it's good not to take that off, but I do this just enough to take off any burrs and leave as much of the coating as possible. Then take grease them and I put it in a container that can be sealed. And in order to lubricate the coupler, I dip the whole coupler in the grease and just shake it off before I put it into and that's how it looks. And we've got lubricant all over the coupler now. I put the coupler pocket together, use a pair of tweezers to hold the coupler assembly together, and then installed it on the underside of the caboose with brass screws. I use brass screws so the magnet won't draw the car to the center of the magnet. I use brass screws on the trucks also, that or stainless, so it doesn't draw the truck screw to the middle of the magnet. Here's a situation, and these happen to be Rapido, their first generation. They were either boxcars or reefers. I think they were reefers. And the cars were absolutely wonderful. The trucks were wonderful, but their first generation couplers were terrible. They were like dipped in black paint or something, so they didn't work at all. And all the glad hand was in the wrong place. I think they've solved this problem on later cars, but their first run of cars was pretty bad in this area. Like I said, the coupler itself was almost like it was dipped in black paint. Notice this gigantic spring over here for closing the knuckle, and which didn't work anyway. And also notice here that their brass spring for the coupler was upside down. This is supposed to be against the car with the flanges up. So what this did was it made the coupler sit wrong in the pocket. Here's another picture showing that upside down brass spring plate. As the previous remount steps, I reassembled the coupler pocket using new Kadee centering spring number 5 coupler ready for installation. And now notice here with the spring in the right place and the coupler over a magnet, it gives a good opening in the knuckle and good delay position. Remount and or replace number 3. This is an AccuRail car. These coupler pockets have like a push-on plate on the bottom of the coupler pocket, and it doesn't hold very well all the time. So here's a case where the car is the right height and the coupler pocket is the right height, but the coupler is hanging down because the cover plate is not holding it right. There's the trip in, and you could push it up and glue it, but then you'd never get the coupler apart again. So I chose to do a different route. This is their AccuMate couplers, which are a scissors piece, and they're, hate to say it, but they're basically crap. They don't work at all. One good thing is they do have a really nice smooth coupler pocket that would work real well for whisker couplers. Remount and or replace number 4 Atlas Accu mount. This is notice this is a plastic coupler, and it's in a coupler pocket that's actually cockeyed. And notice that it's sitting with the glad hand way too far to the side. So when you run it over a magnet, it really doesn't do anything. Here's a situation. This is a Kadee scale coupler in a Kadee coupler height gauge, and notice it won't even couple to the plastic coupler. Here's a remount or replace number 5. Intermountain tank car had a pinned pocket cover that refused to stay in place. I opted to remount the cover with a 256 3/16 brass screw. Drill, tap. I use this double-ended pin vise a lot. It keeps the drill on one end and the tap on the other end and the right size screws. It makes it pretty easy to keep track of things. And I just drilled out, instead of the pin, I just drilled out and put a brass screw there, and it allows it to tighten up. See, there's almost no extra slop here between this. If you didn't want to use the screw, you could always get the coupler pocket clamped up in place where it belongs and put just a touch of ACC here. And if you ever need to get it apart, you can get that apart with like a chisel blade, X-Acto chisel blade. This is the other end of the same car. I did one end one way and the other end the other way, just for samples. Remount and or replace number 6, Proto 2000. This is a Dusty swap acquired tank car, and it has the plastic P2K plastic couplers. And the plastic couplers, the whole thing is plastic, and the way they close the coupler pocket is, see this thing sticking out back here? That's a piece of plastic that's supposed to do the job of the spring that a Kadee uses. And most of the time I've seen these couplers, this piece of plastic is just bent way the heck out of the way, and it does nothing, and the coupler just sits open all the time. There's a better picture of it. So for replacement, remount and replace number 7 red caboose, well detailed kit without coupler skipping car floor. Number 51 and 256 allows mounting either types of coupler here. Very easy to do. This is a scale coupler in a long pocket. This is a number 5. Section 5, shimming up knuckle height, shimming at the truck. Oops. Well, I got, maybe you guys can see it. It's 15 thousandths or, and then I got something covering it here. I forgot the other thickness, but the fiber washer, hard fiber washers come in those two thicknesses and lots of different diameters and things, and I have an array of them, and that's for going up with the coupler if you need to raise the coupler or raise the car. To lower it, you can also use the shims that Kadee makes that would go between the coupler pocket and the frame of the car, and that will lower the coupler. And Kadee also makes a mind-boggling array of different long undershank, long center set, long, medium, and short links, and underset, center set, and overset couplers to have your knuckle end up the right height above the rail. This is the tools that I use. There's the graphite and various tweezers, and this is a riffler, a chisel blade, and a box of Kadee number 5s, and a box of those are probably just an array of different. I think these are probably whisker couplers, and this is all my number 5s. And paper and pen for notes and patience. I usually take notes on what I do to cars and stick it in the box with the car so I know what I did. The end.